Hey, what's up, people? Welcome to my review and in-depth analysis of Terminator 3, The Rise of the Machines. And, I really tried hard to like this movie, but unfortunately, this movie falls significantly short in regards to being a true continuation to Terminator 2. Now, my biggest issue with this film is the underlying message that contradicts the sentiments of the first two films in this franchise, and that being that we can control our fate. There is no fate but what we make. Now, the message in this film is basically that destiny exists, that John Connor is destined to be the leader of the resistance, that Judgment Day is inevitable, it was destined to be fought. And for me, that totally just ruins what Terminator is about, in my opinion, which is being able to control your life, being able to make your actions count for change, right? But in this film, it's like, oh, Catherine Brewster was destined to meet John Connor. Catherine Brewster's father was destined to create Skynet. And for me, it's like, well, if John Connor and all these other elements were destined to be, then why even fight in the first place? Why should John even fight against the Terminator or run away from the Terminator if he's destined to be the leader of the resistance? He could just sit there and be like, well, you can't hurt me because I'm destined to be the leader of the resistance. God will intervene. And that's my major issue with this movie. It's not that it's a continuation to Terminator 2 in the sense that Skynet is still thriving or trying to come into existence. I'm not against that idea. In fact, I like that idea because if you sit back and think about it, and I'm not a fan of this, what came first, the chicken or the egg, or this time paradox thing where Kyle Reese was always John's father. To me, I call bullshit on that. For me, there is an original timeline where Kyle Reese was not John Connor's father. The original timeline where John, his father, was not Kyle Reese. Once he sent them back, then it created a whole different timeline. So my whole point is this, that Skynet came into existence in the original timeline without the original T-800 from Terminator 1's chip being left behind, and having Miles Dyson from Cyberdyne use that chip to reverse engineer and then create Skynet. So there is a timeline where Skynet came into existence without that, right? And there is a timeline where John Connor came into existence without Kyle Reese being his father. So my whole point is this, that Skynet would have came into existence without the Terminator chip from the first film being left behind, right? So the point is this, Skynet could still come into existence even though Terminator 1 and Terminator 2 happened. One thing that's said in this film that I actually like is that when Arnold Schwarzenegger says to John Connor that you only postponed Judgment Day, you didn't prevent it. But this whole thing that Judgment Day is inevitable, I'm like, no. I totally disagree with that. And for me, the true sequel to Terminator 1 and Terminator 2 is the Sarah Connor Chronicles. The Sarah Connor Chronicles is a great show because even Skynet is still trying to come into existence, right? Different methods, and it's basically, it's always shape-shifting the way that Skynet is trying to come into existence. It's this engineer over here maybe working on something that could lead to the possibility of Skynet coming to existence. Another engineer over here, and Sarah and John are just running all over the place trying to prevent the technology from coming to existence. However, in this movie, it's like, no, Catherine Brewster's father, he's the one that makes Skynet come into existence. He's destined to do that. And for me, that's total bullshit. For me, that's why I can't get on board with this movie. And not only that, but this movie has some of the most awful music that I've ever heard for a film. This film is scored like it's Back to the Future for some reason. You'll see action sequences and the score, the soundtrack sounds like it should be for like a Robert Zemeckis film. And that's nothing against him. He's a great American director, but he typically makes like these family adventure films, Back to the Future trilogy, Forrest Gump, and I hate the soundtrack to this movie so much because I really feel like if the soundtrack had been better, it would have been more tolerable. Right? Especially for the action sequences. I always pay attention to these musical cues and they almost sound comedic, right? And it's almost like I'm listening to a Danny Elfman score, like taken from a Tim Burton film, like A Nightmare Before Christmas or Edward Scissorhands, and it's thrown into this Terminator action film, and it's just not appropriate at all. Another thing that I really dislike about this film is the cinematography. It's super bland and boring. And the directing, Jonathan Mostow, who directed this film, he's a competent director. However, coming off the first two films, which were auteur films, right? James Cameron, right? I mean, this guy, Jonathan Mostow, has no signature style whatsoever. It's like he filmed this movie like a made-for-TV movie. And it's just so boring. His shot compositions are so boring and uninspired. And it almost feels like a director or a student from a community college film class made this movie. And you know, in fact, I honestly believe that there's film students out there that could have done a better job. I don't know why they chose to hire this guy, because he is the definition of mediocrity. Like, sure, it's serviceable. Yeah, he got the movie made, and I could see what's going on, but it's just so boring. And if you come to this movie right after seeing Terminator 1 and Terminator 2, it's jarring. The mediocrity is so jarring that it's just like, my God, who thought it was a good idea to let this guy direct this movie like this? I mean, it's just so boring. Another issue that I have with this film is the screenplay. Not only do I disagree with just this whole, like, it's inevitable, it's your destiny nonsense, but just the screenplay by John Brocato and Michael Ferris is just, I don't like the comedic efforts in this film. The tone of this movie is all over the place. I mean, there's moments in this film where you feel like, okay, I can get on board with this. This is getting good now. And then all of a sudden you have this comedic routine that just feels out of place for a Terminator film, and I don't appreciate it. I don't. And the tones clash. And then the next minute you have some ultra-violent thing going on, and you're like, okay, now we got the horror elements going down. This is great. And then boom, another comedic scene with Arnold Schwarzenegger like talk to the hand with this ridiculous song playing, and I just don't know what was going through these guys' mind. It's like telling a joke and you laughing at your own joke. You being the only person laughing at your own joke. You're the only one that thinks it's funny. That's how I felt with this movie. The comedy was just terrible. Terrible. And maybe people laughed when this film first came out, but now that it's been, what, 20 years later, it's just not funny anymore. It sucks. It's lame. It's corny. That being said, one thing that I do like about this film is the action. I think this film delivers on the action. The sequence with the crane is just remarkable. I mean, it's just unmitigated destruction and epic action, and also the scene from the graveyard or the cemetery involving the hearse. That was amazing stuff too. I really appreciated that. I thought that was awesome. And I think the best thing about this movie is Kristanna Loken and Arnold Schwarzenegger. They both gave it their all. They both did an outstanding job. It just really sucks that the story, the screenplay, the cinematography, the score, the directing suck for this movie. They really do. Now, when it comes to John Connor, I am not a fan of Nick Stahl as John Connor. There's a lot of things that I don't understand as far as how they wrote this character. One of the biggest and most blasphemous things about this movie is that right from the very beginning, you know that you're in for some trouble. Because right from the very beginning of this movie, Nick Stahl, his voice narration is going on, and he says, "The Terminator tried to kill me before I was born." And then and then another Terminator was sent back when I was 13 years old. Yeah, that's not right. He was 10 years old. It's even written on the screen in Terminator 2 when the T-1000 goes into the police car and reads the little computer screen. It says John Connor, 10 years old. I mean, and that just shows you everything wrong with this movie right there. It just shows you that the people that wrote this movie weren't true fans. Maybe they think they're fans. Maybe they're, oh, I saw Terminator 2 when it came out in 1991, and then I saw it again in 1997. I love Terminator. No, you need people that watch this series religiously to write this movie. I mean, that's such an epic fail. How can you get that wrong? How can you get that wrong? It's literally written on the screen in Terminator 2 that John Connor was 10 years old. And then right away, as soon as this movie begins, it's like maybe the fourth line spoken in the movie. A big error. The Terminator tried to get me when I was 13 years old. And it's just like, oh my God, that was such a disastrous error. And that tells you everything that you need to know as far as what's wrong with this movie. These people did not put a lot of thought into this movie. Now, there's some great ideas. Like, I like the idea that Skynet's still trying to come into existence. I like the idea that it's a military application that infiltrates the web or cyberspace. I like those ideas, right? But coming back to Nick Stahl, I do not like him as John Connor. I don't like this whole, like, I'm unconfident, I'm unsure of myself. And even when we get that flash to the future and see him as a leader, and he's there with the resistance around him, like, yeah! I just don't buy it. I just don't like him as a leader. I don't feel like he conveys leadership qualities. He comes across as weak in this movie, and maybe that was the point at first, but he should have transitioned to a strong character, and he just doesn't. And again, when you see that glimpse of him into the future, it just feels forced. I'm just not a fan of Nick Stahl as John Connor. And another thing that I thought was absurd was that, again, the voice narration begins and Nick Stahl as John Connor saying, like, I live off the grid. I just want to be away from everything. But he's still in Los Angeles. So he's trying to live off the grid. He's trying to be an unknown. He's trying to go undiscovered because he still fears the possibility of Skynet hunting him down. But where does he live still 13 years later? Los Angeles, where the first two films took place. If you were really trying to run away from Skynet and live off the grid, you would have moved to Nebraska. So right there from the very beginning, as soon as the first words are literally spoken in this film, I have a problem. Doesn't make sense. And unfortunately, those kind of sentiments haunt this entire film. Even though you'll see moments of greatness, especially with Kristanna Loken and Arnold Schwarzenegger and the action sequences and some of the ideas with the military and stuff, but it just all falls apart with this whole, like, Judgment Day is inevitable. Oh, John, you were destined to fight to fight Skynet. It's your destiny, and the whole point was just to survive. Well, why does he have to survive if he's destined? Like, why does he have to try to survive if he's destined to lead the resistance? He's gonna survive anyway because he's destined to lead the resistance. Divine intervention will happen. See, and that kind of crap is just stupid and shouldn't belong in a Terminator film. I have no problem with Skynet trying to come into existence and our heroes trying to prevent that, as seen in the superior Terminator Sarah Connor Chronicles, right? So, with that being said, let's begin this analysis of Terminator 3, The Rise of Machines, a film that I cannot recommend. So as I stated in the introduction to this review, you notice that things are off immediately once this film begins. And I'm referring to when John Connor says that the Terminator tried to kill him when he was 13 years old, and it was clearly stated or basically conveyed in Terminator 2 that he was 10 years old. So right there, you already see that the continuity errors are present, and you see, I mean, just seeing such a grave mistake being committed literally within the first 2 minutes of the film is just a signal for disaster. And like I said, I'm not a huge fan of Nick Stahl as John Connor. He just does not have the attributes of a leader, in my opinion. Even seeing these glimpses of him as a future leader with John Connor's trademark scar and him basically yelling in victory, it just to me, it just looked forced, and it just looked really fake. And another thing is that for some reason, the CGI and the special effects just don't mesh well together, in my opinion, for this future war scene that we see in the very beginning. So John Connor starts the film narrating about how he's been running away and living off the grid, which makes absolutely no sense to me, considering the fact that he still lives in LA. So the first film happened in LA, the second film happened in LA. The Terminator is trying to kill his mom. The Terminator is trying to kill him, and supposedly he's living off the grid. But where has he been for the past 13 years? Still in LA. It's not exactly the best course of action to take if you think Terminators are coming for you and you just stay in the same place all the time. So to me that just signifies bad ideas, bad writing, and such. And coming back to these future war scenes, they just look very CGI-ish to me. Even if you go back and see behind the scenes in some of these featurettes and documentaries, they use some practical effects, right? And they use some miniatures and things like that, but I don't know, man. The end product just does not look as good as Terminator 1 and Terminator 2. And in my opinion, the other later movies, right? I think the special effects look better in Salvation and in Genesis. So I don't know what it is here, but the future war scene just does not look, it just looks like a CGI mess to me, right? I mean, I won't say that it looks terrible, but at the same time, out of all the films, it just looks the fakest. Even the flames and the fires and all this stuff just do not look real to me. I feel like if this was Terminator 1 and Terminator 2, the entire thing would have been miniatures, right? Those fires would have been real, right? But I could tell with CGI, and it just does not look believable. Even the Terminators as they're walking, and they look CGI-ish to me, right? And I cannot convey to you how much better seeing the endoskeletons, the T-800s in Terminator 1 and Terminator 2, and just knowing that they were actually real, that they were real animatronics and real stop motion miniatures being used. It just looks more believable to me. So that's my rant for the special effects as far as the opening to this film. Coming back to Nick Stahl as John Connor, I just don't like the guy. I think he's a weak protagonist. And not only that, but Claire Danes, who plays Kathy Brewster, who's supposed to be John Connor's future wife, I just did not find her to be a good protagonist either. I just don't feel an attachment to her. I don't empathize with her journey or her emotions. And I don't think Claire Danes was a good fit for this role. I think somebody else could have been better casted. No one comes to mind, but I just do not like her depiction of Kathy Brewster. Right? Now, in regards to Kristanna Loken, she is just amazing in this role. I mean, she is one of the best things about this film. I mean, right from the very beginning, she gets it. she is so convincing as a Terminator, and she does an outstanding job, right? Even though they try to add a little bit of comedic sentiments to her and Arnold Schwarzenegger's performance. I mean, she just does an outstanding job. She's beautiful, and at the same time, she's able to convey her lethality to the viewer, and she does an outstanding job. So right from the onset of this film, we see things are kind of unfolding differently when compared to Terminator 1 and Terminator 2. And what I'm referring to is that in Terminator 1 and Terminator 2, the Terminator had a single target, but here the TX, which Kristanna Loken plays, she's out to take out John Connor's generals and just more than one target, right? That's what we're seeing here. And I thought that was interesting. So we see the TX taking out some of John Connor's future generals. At this moment in time, they're children. And, you know, that really was utilized to convey a sense of horror, right? So this film has a little bit of the horror elements that the first two films had. And when you see the TX killing kids, it really is able to generate these horror sentiments, right? Even though this film is more of an action film and it doesn't have the drama that Terminator 2 had, not even in the slightest, at the very least, it's still able to retain some of the signature horror feelings that the first two films were able to generate. Now, another thing that's going on is that there seems to be a malfunction with just machines and technology, and it has to do with a virus spreading, and we're going to get more into that as this review progresses, but you see little subtle references to this, especially when you see Kathy Brewster and her fiance having difficulties with the barcode scanning thing, and there's just other elements like her phone not working, the cell phones are not working, and what happens is that Kathy Brewster's father, who works in the military, decides with some persuasion from his superior officers to use Skynet to solve this virus from spreading, but that ultimately was all part of the plan, because now you just gave absolute authority and power to Skynet, an artificial intelligence that decides to destroy humanity. Now, in regards to Arnold Schwarzenegger, it's always a pleasure to see Arnold Schwarzenegger play this iconic role. He looks great. Like, this was the last, I want to say, movie that actually captured Arnold Schwarzenegger in his prime physical condition. He looks impeccable. He looks ripped. He looks swole. He looks amazing. It's just unfortunate that this dramatic entrance of him traveling from the future is completely ruined with this whole, like, going to the bar and have an argument with the gay stripper, and then this whole talk to the hand thing. I mean, this is a sign of the terrible things to come with this film as far as the humor. Now, Terminator 2 had humor in it, but it was restrained, and it didn't throw the tone of the series off. It didn't throw the tone of the movie off. You even see some humor in Terminator Genesis, and it does go a little overboard, but not anywhere near as bad as it does here. I mean, this is just cringeworthy as hell. Again, you may have laughed when this film came out 20 years ago, but now it's just cringeworthy, and it just makes me it makes me face palm, right? And it just makes me roll my eyes because it's just so bad. And this is just one scene of several where the comedy just falls flat. And you ask yourself, why did they not take this movie seriously? And that is a main theme in this review. I feel like they did not take this movie seriously. I mean, coming off of Terminator 1 and Terminator 2, to make this film in the tone that it was made just feels preposterous to me. And everything from the humor
to the lighting and especially the score, just tell me that this movie was not taken seriously at all. It feels like a parody at times. The only time that this movie feels like it's taking itself seriously is during the action sequences. When you see some epic action sequences, such as the crane sequence, and when they're at the graveyard and running away from the hearse, running away in the hearse from the TX, the film feels like it's taking itself seriously, and those are the best moments. The action in this film is great. However, outside of that, the movie feels like a parody. And those action sequences, even though they look great, sometimes they're tainted by just the awful score, which sounds like it belongs in a Back to the Future movie. But again, seeing Arnold Schwarzenegger with those ridiculous Elton John glasses, it's not funny anymore. Maybe it was funny 20 years ago, but it just makes me roll my eyes, man. It's just bad. It's like, to me, the comedy in this is like Jar Jar Binks bad. It's like, look, it's not funny. What the hell were you thinking? It's like it's in a way it makes me feel like they're making the Terminator feel less threatening, right? They're turning it into a joke. For me, I don't want the Terminator to be a joke. I want the Terminator to be intimidating, frightening, scary, even when I'm looking at a good guy Terminator. For instance, Arnold Schwarzenegger, the T-800 in Terminator 2, yeah, it had a little bit of funny moments, but it always felt like a lethal killing machine that you feared and respected. But unfortunately, I don't feel that way here with this Terminator. And honestly, I don't feel that way in when Arnold Schwarzenegger reprises the role again in Genesis and Dark Fate, even though I think Genesis is a better movie than this one. All right, but we'll get to that. That's another story. So apparently what happens with John Connor is that he gets into a motorcycle accident, and then he breaks into Kathy Brewster's vet shop where she takes care of animals at the veterinary. She's a veterinarian, and he takes some drugs to help him with his pain from his injuries. He passes out. She gets alerted to some kind of emergency, goes to her clinic, and then there she runs into John. And I don't know, man. These two have absolutely no chemistry whatsoever. Nick Stahl and Claire Danes have absolutely no chemistry at all. Like, even when they're supposed to not like each other, and then they're supposed to have some kind of bantering. I don't know, man. These two just do not. I just don't feel like I'm watching a Terminator movie. This film feels like a direct to television movie. Like, it feels, I don't even know, man. This feels like something that you would see on TNT or something. But these two have absolutely no chemistry. And then some of the action sequences or the way that these scenes transition from one to another just feel ridiculous. Like when she takes the paint gun from John Connor and then shoots him, and then she like pulls him through the door. It just so happens that there is this big cage with the door wide open just for her to throw John into and lock it up. It just so happens that there was a lock on the door. I mean, it just feels ridiculous. It just feels so unbelievable, that transition, and the way that she was able to know that in that room there was a cage and that the door was wide open. It's like, oh, I know that was in there. And it's like, it was just poorly planned and coordinated, right? And you see things like this throughout the entire film. And John tries to plead with her, tries to let her know that he didn't mean her any harm. And apparently they know each other from back in the day before Terminator 2 took place. I guess they were playing Spin the Bottle, and then they kissed or something. And then this later is touched upon, in which that, they were always destined to meet each other kind of thing. This stupid notion of destiny, which is the biggest crime that this film commits, is that destiny is present, and that and that there's absolutely nothing you can do to prevent Judgment Day, and that there's absolutely nothing that could be done by Skynet. John Connor will always be the leader of the resistance. So it's just total bullshit. So the TX goes to the clinic, the veterinary clinic, to take out Kathy Brewster because she is John Connor's future wife. And then while she's there, she finds out that John Connor is present, the primary target. And apparently now the TX is able to scan for DNA by using its tongue. And then I always hear jokes about how when she was able to identify the blood of John Connor, she had this orgasm. And it does look like that. And I don't know if that was supposed to be comedic or what. But anyway, I just had to take note of that. So the TX is able to conclude that John Connor is present, the main target, and then the T-800, Arnold Schwarzenegger, comes to the rescue, to both Kathy and John's rescue. Now, I just gotta say, this action sequence where the T-800 is in this pickup truck and basically like barely misses Kathy Brewster. It runs over the TX, but Kathy Brewster is laying on the floor, and the truck is able to perfectly coordinate its tires in the way that it lands so that it misses Kathy. Oh my God, I don't know why, but that action sequence always looked crappy as hell to me. It just looks so bad, in my opinion. I don't know what it is, but every time I watch it, it just rubs me the wrong way. Like, I understand that the T-800 is a cyborg and that it's probably able to, synchronize the way that it's going to land, and it has all this technical readouts and specifications as to how to strategically land its vehicle so that it doesn't kill Kathy Brewster. However, the execution just looks so stupid. It looks like a cartoon. That's what it is. It looks like. It looks like a cartoon, like I'm watching Looney Tunes. And anyway, so the T-800 is able to save Kathy Brewster and John Connor. And one thing that really kind of rubs me the wrong way is that when John Connor encounters the T-800, and the fact that it looks like the Terminator from Terminator 2, the one that it had a previous encounter with, initially at first, it's kind of like speechless, right? John Connor's speechless. He doesn't know what to say, right? And I thought that worked really well, right? But later in the movie, it's basically asking the T-800 if it remembers him, right? It's like, don't you remember we blew up Cyberdyne? Don't you remember Hasta La Vista, baby? And I was like, when I saw that, I was like, what the hell? Is this guy stupid or what? Like, dude, it's obviously not the same model. Like to me, I don't know what the hell the writers were trying to go for there, but the only thing that they achieved was making John Connor look like an idiot. Right? I mean, to me, the John Connor that I follow, the one that I believe in, would never conclude that this T-800, this new one, is the same one from Terminator 2. Right? The John Connor that I believe in would be smart enough to conclude that it's a different T-800 model. Right? But again, that just illustrates the shortcomings, not only of Nick Stahl's portrayal, but just the general depiction of John Connor in this movie. Easily the weakest depiction of John Connor out of the entire franchise, in my opinion. Now, moving on, we have some great action sequences. One thing that I really want to note is that the TX having these advanced features, being able to control machines, being able to basically shapeshift her body to have these highly technical weapons that are basically anti-Terminator weapons. I thought that was awesome, right? I mean, it really ups the ante as far as making things difficult for Arnold Schwarzenegger's character. And this action sequence involving the crane and the T-800 on the bike, and then John Connor and the veterinary clinic truck, pickup truck, or whatever the hell it is. I thought it was great, man. I mean, the way that they utilized that crane to basically level an entire block, that was awesome, right? Easily the best scene out of the entire movie, even though sometimes you got this stupid score playing that just doesn't mesh well with what's happening on screen, and even some of the sound effects sound stupid, right? If you really pay attention, some of the sound effects, it feels like they're trying to make it cartoonish. Best example, like when John Connor hits the children's, I got all the children's toys that are on the lawns of the houses. You hear these like noises that sound like clown effects, like the clown nose, like if you squeeze it, it goes and things like that. And then when Schwarzenegger's hanging on the crane, and then he gets smacked by the fire truck, and then you hear the crane, the hook swinging and stuff, and then he says, "I'll drive." Man, it just comes across as cartoonish, and the comedy comes across as forced. It's not funny. Nevertheless, this action sequence involving the crane is epic. I really enjoy it. I thought it was awesome. I thought it was badass. Great stunt work. An absolutely outstanding action sequence. Now, right after this, we get some exposition delivered by Arnold Schwarzenegger through the dialogue. And basically, we are told that John and his mother, they only succeeded in Terminator 2. They only succeeded in postponing Judgment Day, right? And then Arnold Schwarzenegger says that Judgment Day is inevitable, right? Now, I have no problem with the notion of Judgment Day being inevitable because of human nature, because humans are always at war with themselves. They create weapons of mass destruction. So a cataclysmic event like Judgment Day occurring is plausible, right? However, the film just veers off course in regards to what this franchise stands for and starts to talk about destiny and things like that, which I totally disagree with. Now, after this scene, we get some more horrendous comedy when our protagonists go to the gas station, and then we recycle the joke that was delivered previously in this film, which is the whole talk to the hand crap, which is just not funny. It could have been funny seeing the T-800 just stuff a bunch of items into the grocery shopping little basket, and that was kind of funny, but when he just turns around and says talk to the hand, and then you have that soundtrack playing going like funky funky, it's just so cringeworthy. It is just so bad. It just rubs me the wrong way. It's like somebody scratching a chalkboard. I mean, it just gosh, it's just such a terrible scene, and the comedy just falls flat. Now, I really want to commend the scene where the TX murders Kathy Brewster's fiance. I thought that was well executed. It totally had horror elements interjected into that scene, which I really appreciated. The way that she just was able to twist her entire torso around was creepy, and then you just heard his scream and then blood splattering all over his and Kathy's picture, which was classic horror style kind of execution, which I really appreciated. And then once the police go to investigate her disappearance and speak to the TX, which is now disguised as the fiance, it's pretty, the execution was well done, pretty creepy, pretty lifeless in the eyes, and I really enjoyed that. Now, the next scene where our protagonists arrive at Sarah Connor's basically where she's buried, but actually turns out to be just a cache of weapons, right? I like this scene. Some fans don't like it. I think some fans actually say that the birth date for Sarah Connor is wrong. I'm not too aware of that, but it wouldn't surprise me considering the epic failure that they did when they at the beginning of this film when they said that John Connor was hunted by the Terminator when he was 13 when it was actually 10. So a mistake like that, I totally believe that that could happen. Now, what I do like about this scene is that John basically tells the story of how Sarah Connor celebrated when the initial Judgment Day passed, when the date passed and there was no Judgment Day, and how John said that Sarah would tell him that every day after this is a gift. And even though she would say that, obviously, since she has the weapons cache hidden in her casket, obviously she never really believed that. And I actually liked that. I thought that was some good writing, and I thought that was pretty awesome. And Kathy Brewster decides to use this as an opportunity to try to escape her quote unquote kidnapper, which is the T-800, but she quickly finds out that the T-800 truly is a machine when she shoots it in the head, and Arnold Schwarzenegger catches the bullet with his teeth, which was kind of a nice touch. And anyway, this scene has an epic action sequence, which is iconic. Even though this movie, I really don't like it at the end of the day. I mean, there's some entertaining parts. This movie, this is an iconic scene. Seeing Arnold Schwarzenegger, the T-800, come out holding Sarah Connor's casket over one shoulder while basically blasting at the police with a minigun with the other hand. That was awesome. That's just an awesome sequence. And the way the action unfolds with the TX showing up and the way the TX murdered the detectives when she punched through the seat while she was sitting in the back and just punched through the driver's seat, and you could see her hand basically go through the detective, and her bloodied hand just starts driving the steering wheel while the hand is going through the detective. That was pretty awesome and pretty gruesome, and I really appreciate it because, once again, this series started out as sci-fi horror, so it's great to see some of those horror elements present in this film, even though it has a lot of issues. So we get this epic action sequence where our heroes escape in a hearse, and the TX shows up to hunt them down. But I have to mention that the psychiatrist from Terminator 1 and Terminator 2 shows up. So Dr. Silberman makes an appearance, and it's kind of funny, and it's trippy to see him question everything that he's seen. He's still in denial about the existence of the Terminators. And just really quick, I gotta give a little shout out to the Terminator Sarah Connor Chronicles TV show, because Dr. Silberman shows up in that show, and the continuation of his story is just awesome. It's the exact opposite of what's depicted here. So in the TV show, Silberman is a believer, right? He's a full-blown believer. He doesn't deny what he saw in Terminator 1, and especially in Terminator 2 when he saw the T-1000 do its thing. So Dr. Silberman in that show is just outstanding, and I gotta give a plug to that show because his depiction here, once again, he's the skeptic, he's the doubter, but hopefully seeing Arnold Schwarzenegger, the T-800, for the third time, coming out holding that casket and shooting the minigun at all the police officers, hopefully he's a believer, finally, in this timeline. So again, the action sequence involving the TX hunting down our heroes in the hearse was great. Love this. Thought it was awesome. And even some of the humor here doesn't fall flat. Like when the Terminator says, "I think we got to get a new vehicle." That was great. Great stuff. And Arnold Schwarzenegger knows how to deliver a line in a comedic fashion. And it's great. Always great to see the Terminator as the T-800. And I just want to mention really quick an excellent scene where I thought Arnold Schwarzenegger did a great job, and that's when he starts to strangle John Connor because John was being he was being, I guess you want to say, cowardly. He was despairing, and basically the T-800 grabs him by the throat, and this causes John to get angry, and he's like, "Fuck you, you fucking machine!" And then Arnold Schwarzenegger lets go and says, "Good, anger is more useful than despair." And then he tells John that psychology, he's been programmed to understand human psychology. And basically, he's just trying to motivate him, right? And he says, despair, he says, anger is more useful than despair, right? I really like that scene. Thought it was well written. Great performance from Arnold Schwarzenegger. Now, we find out some very important details in the following scene. And we basically find out that Judgment Day is actually on the day that's happening in the movie. Like, it's going down today. So I got to give the filmmakers credit because that definitely generates a huge sense of urgency for our characters, right? And now we as the audience are on the edge of our seats, right? Because we didn't know that it was actually happening on the day where the movie's taking place. And another thing we find out is that Catherine Brewster's father, he is the main honcho in regards to what's going down. Basically, he is the one that literally activates Skynet. So it's really important that they get to Kathy's father before the TX does, because the TX wants to make sure everything goes according to plan. So this sets everything in motion, and now our heroes are in a race against the TX to reach Kathy Brewster's father and try to stop Judgment Day from happening. Now, unfortunately, the TX arrives first, and unfortunately, it's too late. Kathy's father activates Skynet in an attempt to stop the virus that's messing up all the machinery and networks all across the country. And now Skynet immediately becomes in control of military applications, and it just starts to take over. So all these little applications, these weapons projects that they were testing out, Skynet takes over. And I gotta say that some of these robots and they're definitely precursors to the hunter killers. They look impressive, right? And they look like they're actual animatronics. They're not CGI. Because some of the CGI in this film hasn't aged well, but this looks great. Some of these little mini tanks and stuff. And it's also interesting to see our heroes have to go up against these lethal things, and these things are killers. You see a lot of innocent people at the military base just getting lit up, just getting murdered. And I thought the action sequences here were impressive. Now, another important detail that is actually divulged to us before we get to this final showdown is that the T-800, that is basically the guardian of John and Kathy in this film, actually killed future John. So this T-800 killed future John and was reprogrammed by Kathy and sent back in time to protect John and Kathy. So I thought that was very fascinating detail. I mean, when I first saw that, it's another thing. It's another thing that keeps the audience on the edge of the seat, right? It generates a sense of urgency. So not only did you find out that the Judgment Day is actually happening on the day that this film is taking place, but you also find out that the Guardian, the T-800 that is protecting John and Kathy, is the killer of future John. So a lot of twists and turns, right? It's just too bad that it's all shitted on by this whole destiny aspect that is going on in this film, and how Judgment Day is inevitable because of destiny and all that crap, which is really silly. Now, unfortunately, Kathy Brewster's father is killed in this action gunfight or whatever, this sequence where Skynet takes over all the military applications and robots and all the weaponry that they were working on. And he basically tells Kathy and John to go to a bunker, right? So they're thinking that if they go to this bunker, they're able to stop Skynet. Like there's a central computer or something that could be shut down. So they're under that presumption. And after this, we got a nice little battle between the TX and the T800. Now, is it anywhere as good as the previous film, as the T1000 versus the T800? Hell no, absolutely not. It's too CGI driven. It comes across as fake at times. However, it was still enjoyable, right? And for a brief moment, the TX reprograms the T800 to kill John. And fortunately, the T800 is able to shut itself down and reprogram itself. But for a little minute, it just seemed like the T800 was going to kill John. I mean, there is some stupid stuff like when Kathy gets out of the plane and tells the T800, stop! And then the T800 just throws her like a piece of meat across the room. I mean, that was just so dumb. I mean, I think that was dumb from a directing and writing point of view, because Kathy already knows that it's a Terminator. It's a lethal killing machine. And she just basically gets out of the plane and tries to grab it. Like, stop. Like the damn thing is going to actually listen to her. She's lucky that it didn't murder her. Thought that was terrible. It made the character look stupid. And honestly, like I said, Kathy Brewster is a weak character. She sucks. I don't like her. She sucks. She's weak. She's kind of dumb. I don't know. I really wish this movie didn't even have her in it. And Claire Danes, she just doesn't do the character justice either. And the chemistry between her and Nick Stahl sucks, right? So the movie has a really big issue when 2/3 of your main protagonists suck. So anyway, the T800 is able to shut itself down before it kills John Connor, and John and Kathy are able to get in a plane and fly to the bunker where her dad told her to go. However, the TX is able to hop in a helicopter and basically get there, and basically it tries to stop John and Kathy from trying to stop Skynet, or that's what they think. Fortunately, the T800, Arnold Schwarzenegger, is able to show up and stop the TX. And the way that it does this is that it has to sacrifice itself. So in blowing itself up, it's able to take out the TX. Now our heroes are free to stop Skynet, basically this central computer, or they think so. So they go deeper into this bunker only to find out that there is no central computer. And basically John starts to freak out, and he's like, why did your dad tell us to go here when there's no way to shut Skynet down? And then Kathy basically says, we were sent here to survive. The whole point why we were sent here was to survive. There was no central computer that could shut down Skynet. The whole point was to survive. Judgment Day is inevitable. There's nothing you could do to stop it because it's your destiny, John. And basically that's how the movie ends, and I call bullshit. I said this twice already. I could have got on board with this notion that that Judgment Day is inevitable because of human nature. But this whole thing that it's your destiny and all that, that's bullshit, right? I just don't buy that. It totally goes against everything that the first two films stand for. And even some of the later films and the TV show. So I can't get on board with that because I feel like it really rips away the heart of the first two movies. And to me, that's the most important thing. That's the most important message. That is the heart and soul of the Terminator series, that you can control your quote unquote fate, right? Essentially saying that there is no fate. We can make a choice. Humanity can save itself. We are not doomed to destruction. So that's why I really can't recommend this film, even though it has great performances from Arnold Schwarzenegger and Kristanna Loken, and it has some decent action sequences. But at the end of the day, I can't recommend this movie. I really can't. and I give it a D plus. Right? It's, I mean, yeah, you could sit through it. There's some entertaining parts, such as the action sequences, but as far as being a good entry to the Terminator series, even I mean, there's other entries that basically are kind of guilty pleasures for me, but this doesn't even attain that status because I watch it and it's upsetting because I don't like the message. And to me, if the message of the movie is not good, then I cannot recommend it. Like, you can have a poorly executed movie, but the message is still good and there's some enjoyable aspects, but I really can't say that about this movie outside of some action sequences. So that concludes my review and in-depth analysis of Terminator 3: The Rise of the Machines. If you enjoyed it, please like, subscribe, and share. Take care, people. And last but not least, one love.